Okay, it's a 12:59 in a few seconds, so we'll begin now. And welcome to this seventh and final meeting of the Community Economic Development Committee, or this incarnation of what will be many more, I'm sure, over time. I'll call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we're meeting as ever on the traditional territories of the Sooke and Sianu nations. Approve of the agenda, please. Catherine Strongwind has moved, seconded by Mayor Tate. All in favor? Yes. Okay, adoption of the minutes of January 14th. No, you could, you're a committee member. Catherine has moved that, seconded by, yes, you may. Okay, by Gwen Fisher. Public question and comment period. There are two members. You're welcome to step up and nothing to say. Okay. All right, so we're going to move into unfinished business. Item 6.1 is the Sooke Region Cultural Plan. And we did discuss four motions at the last meeting, and you've had a time to digest those. I can motivate at this point. I would like to, number 4 was the one that caused us created the most conversation. And so let's bring that up there. So number 4, I have created this alternate option that the Community Economic Development Committee recommends that council direct staff to include cultural and arts land use considerations in future employment land strategic planning, and that these uses also be considered in the next Sooke zoning bylaw. So we can get to moving and seconding that a little later, but my motivation for that is that interestingly, both the strategic plan and the new official community plan very clearly states in goal area number 2 to elevate Sooke's dynamic arts and culture scene, and in the arts and culture objectives, in the community policies area, there's a statement, make space for arts and culture in the community, which is exactly what this motion is speaking to, and encourage the development of arts and culture spaces in the town center. So I think that that's captured. The key would be to remind staff and future councils, this council, that this committee was keen to see arts and arts land use considerations be front and center in all future strategic planning and zoning bylaw work. The other motions seem pretty straightforward. You know, Canvas, the first, is a provisional name for this community art steering group that is recommended in both the 2011 cultural plan and JP's 2022 review for the SPA committee. The key point here is the next item is the coordinator. Now that too is a top recommendation in both the plans, and Canvas cannot rely on volunteers alone. I think we all agree. And since this is a recommendation of a district committee, then it's up to district to source or to look into sourcing funding for this position. And we've suggested it be a part-time position so as to make it more feasible. There is an option under item 2 there. Yeah, I did have an addition to that, which states that the BC Arts Council will provide matching funds for through its community assistance programs for groups like Canvas, as far as I can tell. So that would be an additional and rather critical funding source. And the third motion, if you scroll that up on the screen, please. Yeah, just that as the 2022 review stated very clearly, we need to collaborate with the Sooke and Sianu, and but particularly regarding the South, we have the memorandum of understanding working group, and logically, this request would go through them to add it as an agenda item. So, having said all that, any comments? Or yes, Catherine?
Thank you. I support the plan in principle. However, when I was reading the presentation, I noticed that some of the dollars that are already in existence add up to about $48,000 that the District of Sooke is supporting these nonprofits already. And so my question is, I guess, would that funding consolidate under Canvas, and is there funding through that already available to hire somebody? And my concern is that hiring somebody on a part-time basis is limiting. So when I think about an economic development corporation, could this be something that falls under the corporation that would have a bit more administrative strength? So that's my comment.
I never called a point of order. You are in a committee, so you have your own structure, which is a bit less formal than a regular council meeting. So
we'll just carry on. So there is significant money within that fund, and yeah, and I would think Canvas over the course of time would look into other arts funding and how can that be coordinated, and that work would continue. Okay, Scott, did I see your hand up?
No,
and then Mayor Tate.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I had an opportunity to meet with a pretty large developer, Bearmount developer, over the weekend, and we had actually brought up all kinds of opportunities for Sooke, and I would think working with developers, this could be part of a strategic plan that if they're, you know, in the future building some buildings that maybe they can offer instead of building a park or a sidewalk, maybe it's part of that negotiation that Sooke has in building these spaces in these strategic areas that might be getting developed, for instance. So it's just something for us to think about in the future when we're talking with development, that there are other opportunities for us to create these spaces that may not be the traditional method, let's just say. So
yeah, this kind of infrastructure is not included in the DCC bylaw. I don't believe, Chris, is that accurate? Yeah. And yet developers can reserve space within their, 60,000 square foot or larger project for a cooperative arts gallery or some such. So, yeah, I think that sort of negotiation continues. Is that right, Chris, whenever you're in a rezoning scenario?
Well, that's the benefit of going through a rezoning process, just getting back to some talk about pre-zoning everything. If everything's pre-zoned, you don't have this opportunity to look at these types of opportunities. So just putting in a plug there for any discussion later on about pre-zoning things. So yes, everything's on the table when you're looking at a rezoning application, and it's up to council to determine, staff and council to determine what amenities we might want to wring out of the developer at that time of the rezoning application. And it's a negotiation process. And oftentimes the official community plan will direct those types of priorities for us to look at. So, yep, trails, uses, parks, yeah, any number of things can be looked at in the negotiation process.
Okay, I had a follow-up question there. Now, in pre-zoning, could the district not ask specifically, okay, in this town center area, perhaps along Brownsea Boulevard, we'd like to see, or we insist on community space within this structure? Couldn't that be part of the pre-zoning?
So I guess the question is, are you pre-zoning whole area? Or are you pre-zoning a specific site? I think when I was just talking about pre-zoning, there was some talk about, for instance, blanket pre-zoning the whole downtown area as per what the official community plan designates it. So yeah, that sort of blanket rezoning, you wouldn't be looking at individual properties and what could be garnered from each specific property. Yeah, it's more on the case by case basis.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Mayor Tate. Or
Thank,
Maya, we call their first name basis.
we're in chambers, so it's mayor. Thank you.
Okay, we'll carry on.
Anyway, just that aside, just want to flag just a few challenges this may have. So with the Sooke Program of the Arts Fund or Outdoor Arts Program Reserve Fund, it specifically states in this that it is for the establishment of public art projects approved by council. So the operating component, I'm not sure would be, when we look at it, it's like, oh, we'll use the reserve fund to fund this particular position. That may not be an eligible use of the fund. And the concern would be that this fund exists because it's building permit revenue. That's where the revenue comes from. So as we review fees and charges, there's always a pushback about increasing funds. So if you increase the fund to support the establishment of a staff position, there could be pushback from the building community about paying for more fees. And we hear, so I get it, but it may not provide the outcome that we need. In accessing the reserve fund, they'll say, we don't mind that being there, but it's solely for the cost of the public art installation, not for the coordinator to oversee the establishment of that. So that is just a
Major issue.
yeah, it's a major issue because then when we go to increase fees, there's going to be pushback against the fees because you're basically growing the bureaucracy. In the end is what they will say. And we're not seeing the public art result. So that's sort of the catch there. In some ways also just as we reach the close, like we are in the twilight heading towards the end of this term. So anything new to be established now won't form. It is going to be based on the next mayor and council. And whenever that we know when that council will form, but they will need to then go into their whole forming, storming, norming phase and ultimately come up with what their priorities are for the next 4 years. And then staff will need to respond back by saying, here's now the district administration and our roles and responsibilities to deliver on that. So I've been in the case where it was a mandate of 0% and cut everything back, which means a position like this would be very short-lived and will not survive. So what that is going to look like, I'm not sure. And it's always the case where we can, at this point, put forward a recommendation that an incoming council could consider to say, here's some pieces that are from the council before on things to try. But ultimately, you're going to have members of the community, that are going to be canvassing out, getting feedback and bringing that all forward. And a lot of what is already coming our way is around the affordability. So this will fall in the nice to have as opposed to a must have. And then others are saying groups in Sooke need to start working together in a more collaborative way. So then what is our convening role to help that happen? There's also a pushback, not a push, but we know that we have tremendous volunteer activities, many organizations that are competing against one another for funds. And so that's where sometimes, I don't know, this past Saturday, you could have 3 bottle drives hosted on the same day. And folks are now choosing which one you're going to deliver those bottles to. And then those organizations, if they didn't do that, would then be going to local businesses for sponsorship and the like, or will have to pay more in fees and make that choice as independent organizations. So you have minor sports competing with arts, with seniors initiatives, all of that. In the end, it funnels up to this many taxpayers and this many businesses. So where this fits, and that's where I'm not sure where this fits, but there is a cost pressure right now, as we know, that's coming our way. So I think in some cases it is, I'm not denying that this is not important. It is. Arts and culture is a big part of our community. We see that celebrated every single year. It's just how it gets funded is the ongoing challenge. It's an ongoing challenge, as is, because every element in our community, whether it's the rec center, community hall, they're all facing a rise in operating costs to sustain those facilities for these other pieces to come. But I see that there will be a pushback from the builders and developers if they are in support of the arts, but I don't think would be in favor of a staff position to do so. So that's where I think it's the case. It'll be up to our staff, going back to that, the next council forming priorities, and then the organization within the district to determine what positions need to help that council fulfill its mandate. So it's almost as if we're a year or two early. And it's just the unfortunate timing of where we're at.
Yeah. So a year too early or a year too late, I guess might be the other point. Great points all, of course. That Sooke program, the Arts Reserve Fund, could theoretically be amended to allow this kind of, no.
It's the same concern we have with our community grant program, which we have adjusted a policy over time. And as you know, it's heavily oversubscribed year after year. And we contribute what we can to support the groups, but any overage falls into taxes. So you could amend this, but it's a bylaw that will come forward for several readings. And we hear from every builder that comes forward about their pro forma, and we are pushing them to get the infrastructure, this, that, higher timelines. They hear about their borrowing costs, their pro forma failure. And then in the end, we could do this and then have yet other projects sitting stalled and not doing anything for anyone because we've made it too expensive.
Okay. So maybe can we amend that second motion to remove Sooke program of the Arts Reserve Fund and explore funding options for Canvas coordinator, comma, including matching funds through the BC Arts Council. Is that worthwhile, or is it again?
I would ask
Yeah.
our CAO.
CAO, correct.
Just to the chair, sorry, through the chair. Just wanted to clarify, the SPA, as I believe you guys are kind of coming to this conclusion, the SPA would not be the appropriate funding source for this, because just a reminder, it only takes 3% of the building permit revenue. So like, for example, last year for 2024, like we only added $12,000. So of the 3% of the revenue, and then including interest. So it wouldn't even be close to enough funds to supplement even a part-time employee. So and again, as I believe you hear on a regular basis, staff wouldn't recommend funding permanent positions with reserve funds or any other funding source that is not secured through a tax base. It just makes it extremely risky and a challenge in out years when revenue drops, then where are you making up that shortfall? And so just to maybe back, if we're on that second motion again there, I believe on February 17th, staff are giving an update to council on the overall budget picture for 2026. and then deep diving into RCMP next per council resolution. And then after that, the next meeting after that, I don't know if it's going to be February, we're seeing how the 17th meeting goes, was going to be deep diving into all these various council requests over the years, because there would be, if this one does pass, there's this request, there's foundry requests, there's numerous service agreements asked. So kind of cover all those in a meeting. So maybe deferring, like, I guess sorry, I'm rambling on a little too long here. Wondering the timing for this. Is this for 2027, or are you thinking this would be for a 2026 budget ask?
So the idea would be to create to get some staff feedback on potential funding sources for a coordinator. And that is just a report to council. Yeah, but it's 2027. It's 2026, and we are definitely in a wants, not needs era, aren't we? No, we're in a needs, not wants era, right? As we'll soon discover.
Or must.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's just a point of to consider, is if the timing of this and just staff capacity to create a report, because I
Yeah.
know you say high level report, no report takes less than 10 hours of staff time. Multiple departments review it, and that's fine. We defer to council,
Yeah.
but just want to be realistic on what we'll be able to accomplish. And just a quick blush of this is there's not going to be a lot of creative funding sources that staff are aware of at this time without expending quite a bit of effort. Most of them would require a district contribution, and other streams that I've seen in the past that there's a 50-50 split, as you mentioned. So either way, tax increase, I think, would be the recommended staff option.
Okay. So I guess motion one would at least push out the concept of Canvas, council stating that Canvas is a good logical idea arising out of these two plans. And the district can't assist, but encourages the arts community to gather and coordinate their activities. Is that the best we can do?
I'm sorry, Chair, I'll
Yes,
just share, I'm
please.
not in support of any of this. No,
No.
I, again, I appreciate what's happening, but this will become another district initiative that we cannot take on. And I don't know what the next council is going to do. So in some ways, things just have to wait. I think it's stronger sometimes when organizations collaborate without the district involvement. It puts a stronger case together rather than falling into everything coming into the district, because we're just at a point where it's going to be an expensive tax hit this year. And we are out of capacity without onboarding another staff member, which will be another tax hit. And we heard recently from the business community and the concerns around policing and so forth. And we know from the winter what infrastructure has done to our community. There's expensive repairs that need to be done from a base infrastructure perspective. So it's just not the time. I think to our CEO Gray's point, there's been getting that staff report at the future council meeting that shows what the asks are with the service agreements and the like. It's going to be overwhelming, just like the committee of the whole we had when we did the service level review. And I know many of those organizations are going to be approaching council for an increase to their service agreements, not a decrease. It's always that case. So I would be surprised if anyone said that they no longer require district support unless the organization itself has collapsed. The conversations in terms with the MOU, it's something we can certainly raise. However, it's also up to Sooke and what they want in that MOU as well. So that is an ongoing conversation. And in terms of the business enterprise zone, we've just adopted the OCP. There are some things we need to work through, and there are some adjustments to zoning. So some of this with even the two of us or other council members here can have that conversation when the zoning comes in. But it's a collision. I think it's all ideas. So I would potentially be in support on number 4, simply because to see what that's like, and it's not lost, because we are also hearing about, can we pre-zone this? Can we do this? Can we take lands out of the LR? Can we do, like, there is a wide range of things that council wants to do. So in some cases, this one might be, what about this consideration of, well, there is also a need for amenity space, community space, recreational space, park space, all of that. So it could be another piece that's added to that conversation. But at this point, I'm not in support of this. It's not because I don't appreciate the work, but just I know it's not going to go anywhere. So I'm just being very blunt here and being practical. It's just not going to advance,
No.
not with the other cost pressures that we have.
Yeah. Okay, welcome, Councillor Pearson. Yeah,
Yes, it was at 1 o'clock.
it was at 1 o'clock. You are correct.
Tomorrow, at 1:30, right? No water district meeting. Sorry.
That's fine. That's fine. We're just getting the mayor's very wise reality check around our cultural plan motions. A recognition that we are in a needs not wants era, that this council's coming to a close. And it's going to be up to the next council to determine its priorities. There is hope for, I'd argue there might be hope for the third motion, that the district has every right in that MOU relationship to raise the subject. And could it not raise the subject of mutual collaboration on culture and arts? Could that not be a very simple line item in an agenda one day?
We can raise it. I think it's just, okay, and then what?
Unwritten, who knows? Anything's possible.
Anything's possible, but I think it's also, what do we want to advance with that? What is that, and that is just, what is the material behind that line?
Yeah, that's okay. Now, anyone else is welcome to comment throughout this. But I think this is going down in flames, except for maybe number 4. Scott.
I would agree with Mayor Tate that, and I've been on a few committees in my time, and this happens quite often, which is giving, I think, a lot of reason why the presentation that Catherine and I are going to present makes a lot of sense. Because there's a lot of time that we get toward the end of mayor and council, we have new voting, and we don't know what's going to happen and who's going to be in those seats, and sometimes programs get stalled out, and then the next council has to come in and decide, was that program worthy to keep going, and put again more information in and more energy into whatever they were doing before. And usually it gets stalled out there, and then council usually picks new items of agenda or scraps that and tries their new avenues. And I think, again, I won't get too far in it because it is on our next item here, but I think it gives a lot of, I guess for our planning, is coming up with an economic development corporation that lasts longer than council. Yeah, so that that we develop these plans that are over 4 years, because some of them need to be, and that we have, and we will bring that up. Yeah, so.
Yeah.
Can I just add one more reality?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm talking way too much in this meeting. But even if a council is picking up ideas, the reality, and because I've been here for so long, so you could push back and say, you know, some of you councillors have been in there for longer than a term, and why aren't you carrying on with this? Because unexpected things happen. Did I predict that COVID-19 would hit us and change the way we operate and change how business operates? No. What about the supply chains and the rising cost of everything? What about the cyber threats that hit us? What about the expense of downloading that comes from the province or the feds? What about and then what I do know is infrastructure in our town. culvert, replacement of culverts, stormwater emptying the wastewater lines, other places where sides of the saturation point and cliffs are falling apart. So it comes back to, what do you want your local government to focus on? Community safety, infrastructure, good governments, good rules and bylaws. Sometimes other things need to exist outside of us, and we have touch points together, but you're not fully reliant or need the district's involvement to sustain. Minor sports exist and come and flourish with little to no council involvement. That's just an example. We might sponsor a team. We do work through the commission. It gets more distance, but we're not involved with any of that. And yet it's growing, rising fine on its own without the politics being involved. They probably have their own to contend with. But in this case, we can't do everything. And then I think when we hit a point where the infrastructure is sound and we're not dealing with failing culverts and the expense of putting in roads where we need them, then the district can be more perhaps actively involved, like you see in other communities that are longer established. But in a community like Sooke, where we have to get on the infrastructure and the policing side, really that's where the focus needs to be. And then wildfire, everything comes in, flooding, it'll shut down. There's some communities in BC that are in emergency operations center mode half of their year. It leaves little time for this because it's not, if it's wildfire, flooding, mudslides, flooding, wildfire. And that, to an extent, is what we are being impacted with out here. And we have to focus on. That's our job.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to make a comment and then over to you, Kevin. I've added to, the key point around arts and community economic development and value added of arts activities. I did add to the slide deck in the agenda, the Nordicity report, certain key findings from that, which indicate just how valuable the arts are to a community on a basic economic level, in addition to all those other community vibrancy and wellness pieces. But yes, in this era, it's likely a want, not a need. But number 4, Kevin, over to you. I'll come back.
And sorry to come in late and make a comment, but there's, and the mayor can verify this, and I agree with everything that the mayor says. And I've been here for how many terms now, and it's always seems to be the actual needs seem to take the front seat. And then what do we sacrifice? It's that quality of life, and it feels counterintuitive to us, right? You're 100% right. We got to get the culverts fixed. We've got stuff failing and infrastructure. And then the RCMP have done a presentation which is really ominous for us as a district, overlaying all of that thing. And then so where do we fall to make our cuts and our savings? It goes back into that quality of life. Like, as opposed to and it feels counterintuitive. And sometimes we're tasked with making those tough decisions, and those tough decisions always seem to land there. My suggestion always is, and been with the mayor, I think 4 times now, is that how do we take a 1-page cheat sheet and just slide it onto the desks of the new council coming in? How do we say, this is what we talked about. This is what, and we don't, we're going to boil the ocean and we're going to cure this or that, or, next, you get stars in your eyes and you come in. But sometimes I just feel that, strategic planning be nice to say, what, somehow we got to address this, because we can't ignore the arts and the benefit to the economic development of our community. You can't ignore it, because it is part of who we are as a community, Sooke, and that history and that legacy. But, there's the practical side that comes and always gets there. Somehow I wish that we could just slide a cheat sheet underneath this blotter so that people would say, what, this is what councils have worked on in the past. Good people in the community have worked on. So, comment as opposed to.
Just depends. They might just take it and shred it.
Well,
I've seen that happen too. So
you're 100% right. There's no obligation when it goes further, but Somehow.
Well, I would guess that our 2026 budget is our approved budget and the 5-year plan is that kind of cheat sheet. But I'm curious to Ms. Gray, who has transitioned through a few councils now, how and I'd make the comment that when I was elected in 2018, the previous council had approved work on the transportation and Parks and Trails master plans. And there was no discussion by our council that was the way to go versus, doing an OCP first. But maybe that's because already work had begun. That was approved in 2018, in early 2018. So that council had no hesitation about, here, this is what you'll be doing next. So I guess.
And there's no, the local government act says you can't fetter future councils from their decision making. So it's like, okay, do you need to know, or is it nice to know? I don't know what it is, but you charge off on a path. And here we are in the sunset of our term, right? Talking about something that ought to have been sooner, but yet the needs, Old Man Lake fire, all of these things that come up, and you talk about a forest fire that went out, right? Several months after it started, but the fallout from that fire spun into our operation. Like, how do we fire smart our houses? How do we start, just a single event, a world event. And then you put on top of that the pressures from the federal government and, an election south of the border. We like to think, oh, well, we're independent, but we're not really independent at times, right? There's a big thing that changed down there. Anyway, kind of going down a philosophical road, which. The mayor probably already talked about all that stuff.
I'd just follow through with Rachel and your thoughts on this and how one counts with the next to that transition.
Through the chair, to the committee. I guess it depends on how many new counselors are there. I believe, I wasn't the CAO after the last election, so I don't know exactly what the transition looked like officially, but I would think if it's more or less the same council rolling over, then it's a different kind of orientation you do. And to your point earlier, it depends what's already underway. If major bylaws are already at third reading, it's more of obviously ask council if they would like to start over or where we're going to go next, but and seek the direction. So it's a different kind of orientation you would do from that. As far as for after this election, the first conversation with the new council would, start with a strategic plan going, here's where we're at, here's what's been funded, here's what's in the queue, and then seek direction from the majority of council on where do you want to go next? Is this still stay on this path, or would you like us to divert? Because, certain things are past the point of no return. These other ones tell us stop now, or we're still forging ahead in our planning with that. Because as you council and most of you guys are aware, things take years in the making, most of these things. So it's kind of subjective. Sorry, I don't have the definitive answer. It would just kind of depend. But it's definitely, as a few of you have alluded to, it's deferring to the new council. We can present anything to them, but we follow the direction of council at the end of the day.
I'll get to you, Gwen. Just one follow-up there would be, there is already quite a long shopping list of approved motions out of council and the last council. And I remember the 2015 council, there's still resolutions outstanding. Would it not be possible for this committee to add a resolution that will remain outstanding going into the new term? Very likely, given all else you have on your plate.
Obviously, we defer to the committee, whatever motions that you would like to present to council and council supports would make it to the resolution list.
Yeah.
As far as for the outstanding motions you're referring to, most likely in July, I'm planning on bringing a report forward, kind of saying, here's all the motions that are kind of left. Here's some ones that have been hanging around for a few years. Are they still relevant? They need to be rescinded, and try and at least do a better job of cleaning those up. Because to your point, there's some long in the tooth ones that there's not even any of the staff here anymore that would even remember what that was about potentially, respectfully. So, so there will be a cleanup, but obviously I will defer to the committee on which motions.
Gwen, and then Kevin, and then we'll get these on the floor and voted on.
Well, it almost sounds like we're not gonna get it on the floor, which is maybe feeling defeatist, but at the same time, it is maybe a reality. I think what I'm hearing is if we can get our groups that we've listed in our plan here to work together, JP's, you know, sitting here, it's discouraging because what we as businesses and as our council, this committee was to come up with ways to get money to come to Sooke, how to get people to Sooke. That's what tourism is for. That's what Chamber is doing. All the nonprofit are working towards that. And arts has definitely made a difference in our business and other people I speak to in the business community. But our roads are falling apart. Come down Wright Road. It's like a little, you know, it's everywhere. And I get that. So how I'm feeling through this meeting isn't defeated. It's we got to go back to the table, talk to our groups and become stronger together.
Mhm.
Our, you know, I hear Mayor Tate with, I put my kids through sports, but I paid a fortune to get them in hockey. And I cooked a lot of burgers at the ballpark, as you know, and we all did. It didn't go without labor as well, which is time and money, but the arts are important to our community. And I think that's where Jeff is struggling not to have something go forward to the next council because there's been work put into this to build the economic development of our town. And the arts is something that we can celebrate here. So we're in a catch situation. We may not get funding, but I think we just need to bring all the groups together, just like we did for the economic with Scott and Catherine put together, and as volunteers, just try to make that work until we can get better established to prove that we are worth the money, or maybe MRDT funding, or it's getting an administrative team that can communicate with everybody and help each organization. And after having a visit with Catherine about this new plan, which is the next thing on the agenda, that might be the space for this, the new Economic Development Committee, or it's completely labeled differently. I've got a lot to learn. It's very exciting, it's scary, but that might be where all of these organizations can come together, and that might be our pool for staff. We have to have some staff, but it doesn't necessarily maybe have to filter through district. So I don't think we should feel defeated. I think we should keep all our notes and filter it into what we can learn about this new format for economic development.
Thank you. Gavin and then Mayor Tate.
Excellent comments. Thank you. And we appreciate that. This is, you know, and you know, not the elephant in the room, but we've had a distinct advantage because, you know, I'll gesture towards her. That communication has rang through for 3 solid times, you know, 2 times before that as a counselor, and then 3 times as the mayor. So positive going forward is that the mayor's been able to bring these ideas and embryos of things forward again and again and again. We're not going to have that advantage this time. Hopefully, the mayor doesn't move out of Sooke and can bring it. But again, it's that if we're passionate as a community about the arts and the economic development, then it's not going to be on the shoulders of the mayor next time. You know, it's going to be on us as a community to say how important it is. You know, and we've got to stand up. And I know, you know, some people in this room who are passionate about making things happen. We've got to continue on that. Don't be defeated, right? Don't take no for an answer. It's that, how do we regroup? Again, that huge advantage we've had with Mayor Tate being in that chair, because it can resurface and regurgitate very quickly when you have somebody on the chair. So again, it's for us to be enthusiastic, not lose hope, but you know, it's a detour as opposed to a roadblock, right? So kind of, that's one of those things that we have to think about. Going forward, I don't think there's anybody in Sooke that I've ever come across that doesn't value the arts and the economic engine that it does create. I mean, you just say the word Sooke Fine Art Show and that, because it has the word arts right in it, Sooke Fine Arts, everyone recognizes that. And I think they recognize the benefits across it. So how do we capitalize on those things we've already done? So comments, not questions.
Maya, the mayor.
That's okay.
May-
And I don't want anyone to feel defeated. I'm just hitting the reality of the cost of everything. And that council is doing its part because, to your point, we have to keep the infrastructure together, and everything that was a Band-Aid or a cheap fix is falling apart now. And some of it we see, it's above ground, it's real. A lot of it is underground. And it's a reality that our operations team are dealing with. But every year, and we saw this recently at the committee of the whole, is $388,000 goes towards supporting our not-for-profit sector. That doesn't include the community grants. And in there are a number of organizations doing great things. And that's why I think I'm looking forward to Ms. Strongman's and Mr. Taylor's presentation, because then it's the case of where is there synergy between the various groups, rather than let's do the same thing and ask for an increase and get the CPI. Is that model working? And I would say it does not work anymore. And then putting it back into the municipal mailbox, well, then it's this giant inbox and everyone else is going to do the same thing. Then it's going to be picking and choosing which application is stronger than the other, which one had a grant, and then it comes down to that, because in the end, it's still finite. But the need is certainly there. It is an important part of our community. Not one is more important than the other. Minor sports is important, so is arts, and so is and that's where the whole community economic development piece, and I'll argue, we never even had an economic development officer in years past. I'm looking at Ms. Scott, and then your predecessor, 5 years now, maybe?
Yeah, 5 years, Sue Welke before.
Yes, and even having communications at the district to help
Yeah.
coordinate, and other few positions to help pursue the grants for infrastructure that has led to where we're at now. So it is more than that. It's probably, it's a significant higher piece that we're contributing. It would also be interesting to see, now that the CRD's art service has expanded, is there an opportunity through there to bring in the project funding or the like, and to pull, and I don't remember all the terms of which that is there, but that is another contribution in a different way with a regional focus of which we're a part of, that our organizations locally can get. So in some cases, it's timely to see that, to see the work that has been started now. And that's where maybe over time, there's a service agreement where then council gives that input, but then go and do your thing, report back annually, as opposed to us taking it on and solving all the problems. Because that is where we hit a capacity level and we're done there. And that's why it's not to be defeated. I think it's just, there's an opportunity, just not certain at this point. The opportunity needs to be driven forward by the district. Because then you're coming into the local government tent, which has a whole.
As this committee well knows.
Yes, and it has its limitations.
Yeah.
As you know far better than I.
Yeah, we've come to understand Local Government Act, Community Charter. This is what guides the district, and as much as we may have great wild mind ideas. So let's move into whether we want these on the floor or not. Yeah, Gwen's shaking her head. I would like to definitely get number 4 on the floor, and so I'm going to make that motion, and I'm going to move the alternate motion that the CEDC recommends that council direct staff to include cultural and arts land use considerations in future employment land strategic planning, and that these uses also be considered in the next Sooke zoning bylaw. So Kevin will second that. I'll just quickly motivate. Now, Gail has done fantastic work with, it's the REDIP program, and there is a grant application we'll hear about at the end of March, I think it is. And that strategic planning process, this motion would ensure that arts and cultural components are considered strongly in this study. Can I ask, through me to you, Gail, does that?
Thank you very much, Chair. I have to correct a few things. Certainly it is our new senior planner, Kyle, and the planning department and my department working together that was successful in submitting that READ-UP grant. The READ-UP grant, as we submitted it, was before this conversation on arts and culture. However, that does not mean to say it can't be done. I am sort of poking around to find out, should we be successful in getting those dollars from the province to do that land use employment strategy? I am quite positive, not 100%, but I haven't been told that yet, but coming from the province and having been the adjudicator on these types of grants, I'm quite positive if we were given approval for the dollars, when we go out to RFP to select the consultant to do the work, it can be built into that contract deliverables that we also want to look at employment that would come out of arts and culture as a zoning bylaw. I can't speak for planning and development. I'm sure Chris can follow up, but I don't see it being like a stopgap or a no. I see them saying, well, the dollars are there, so you do a full-fledged inventory of your lands, the best use of those lands, and what kind of jobs can be generated out of that. So I think you would be looking at tourism, you would be looking at arts and culture, you'd be looking at light manufacturing, all components of economic development.
So this motion would be of assistance in shaping that RFP potentially if the grant comes through.
Yeah, I like this one you just read out, alternate option number 4. That I can back that up 100%.
That's good enough for me. Kevin, as the second.
Well, I seconded it for discussion, but and through the chair to our director of planning, it feels like to me, arts and culture could be a use in a specific zone. Do you know what I mean? Like you know how we've got uses laid out in C2, you can have a gas station or whatever. Could we not take our employment lands as identified and have a use in our own existing bylaws now? Like, it seems like it would be simpler to say arts and culture into certain areas that we already have identified.
Yeah,
I'm simplifying
Yeah,
it, but.
I'm not sure there's really a need to include it as a use because it already is a use within a commercial zone. Like it's not specifically stated as arts and culture, but could be gallery or like there are uses that are compatible with what you're talking about. And so I don't think there's any need to do a rezoning to include it because I think it's already allowed within commercial zones in our district anyway.
Right. And my question goes to specific uses, because as an example, when I first sat on council, it came up brew pub. Well, brew pubs were a new use. And because it didn't specifically say brew pub, it took we eventually settled on, I think, a text amendment. So my question is going back to uses, are generic uses good enough? Generally in an application, they're not. Do you know what I mean? But how far do we mine down to arts and culture, I guess is probably, if you're using acrylic paint, and I don't know. Kind of coming out, I'm shooting from the hip because I think about, we already have some pretty good zoning bylaws in place. And what uses are permitted in there, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'd have to get a specific use, but just for instance, we have retail art supply stores, we have galleries, we have community halls that have bands playing in them, that have plays in them. I mean, I'd be interested to see what use you'd be concerned with, but I just on the surface don't see any use that wouldn't already be included.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Comments?
Yeah, just on the motion, and I wonder if this is more sort of to have information handy for staff. So in a pre-application where a developer is coming in and saying, I'm thinking of doing this, and we say, we want so much on the commercial retail, they may ask, well, what sort of tenancy do you have in mind? So rather than just your typical AB store, it's like, okay, be mindful that we have art galleries that are looking for space, looking to expand, but also it comes down to what type of art the artist wants to do. So glass blowing, does that fall into an light industrial use? Some sort of welding or soldering may trigger something beyond a commercial use. You may want, I know that multifamily, like if you're talking about home-based businesses, we run into a collision in multifamily where a music teacher just wants to be able to teach lessons. That may differ if there was someone, what if we wanted to get the Sooke Pipes and Drums band going and someone is learning the bagpipes? It would be a different than learning the flute per se, depending, but these are all active forms. And even when it comes to sports, we know that pickleball is a lot different than virtual golf or a golf. So these are just examples over the years of what has come across our tables in various forms. So it may go beyond just art to display, because sometimes people want to see the artist in action. So if you were to have a kiln to do pottery, does that fall into light industrial commercial? So this is where it is going to depend, but is there some way then of having something that we know there is an outstanding need for this? There's just no place for it. So I think to me, it's the case of as the projects come forward, well, here is an array of uses. But again, I don't know how that works its way into the land use discussions. It's just what I've heard from community members over time, or in one case during the fine art show, there was an event where street graffiti art was showcased and there was huge interest by our youth in our community. It all had to be done outside because of the scale and the way the graffiti art is displayed. So could you just have that in your typical town center? I don't know, because then it probably doesn't have the ventilation for it. Then they have to get permission to use the parking lot, and then it's a thing, it doesn't happen. So that is the problem I think we're trying to solve, is this array of activity that doesn't necessarily conform or comply with what we're seeing. And then it's the case where we do need to partner with the development community to deliver on X, but they need to know that this is what we're coming down with. Fine word, I don't know, like all these things, but that is what is showcased in our community all the time.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. Any further comments? Second time speaker,
Just a quick comment is that
quick.
yes, well, and you know, the mayor's just hit on a real live issue. A piano lesson can't be permitted in a home-based business, but where like piano teachers have taught in homes for eternity, and now we have zoning that gets in the way of that. And there's a collision course sometimes with having good intent, and piano lessons are part of arts and culture, whether we, you know, we have to acknowledge those are the kind of things that people need to do, but a home-based business, I don't know. So there's, I worry about collision courses. Anyway, that's a comment.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mayor Tate, for bringing that up too, by the way. Yeah, exactly. It's a real live case.
Yeah. Yeah, home-based, JP raised this very point, that as much as we can talk about a cultural zone in the town center, we need to make it easier for arts-based, home-based activities. So I would suggest then, in my final motivation on this motion, is that this is a stepping stone towards generating further action of the kind you're describing here. So can we have a vote on this motion? All in favor? And that's unanimous. Okay. Now, committee, you're welcome to bring forward any of the other motions if you'd like to move them, but I think otherwise we are going to move on. And I'll move on with the final comment that the Search and Sooke Region Community Health Network is continuing with its plans for a health summit in the fall. And as was discussed a few meetings ago, this might be an opportunity for the arts community to come together at a particular table at that event and begin the process of finding ways to collaborate and identify what they need. So on that note, we'll close off item 6.1. Now we're moving on to 7.1, presentation on the visioning economic development in Sooke. So over to Catherine and Scott.
Okay, thank you. Oh, there. You could, either way. I don't know how to work these gadgets. Thank you.
You just click through.
Okay. All right, thank you. I need my glasses. Yes, so on January 20th, we held the Visioning Economic Development Open House at Stickleback Restaurant. And we've created this What We've Heard report. And going back to one of the comments earlier, like this visioning started for me in 2024. So it's been a couple of years. So I hope that people don't feel defeated and don't give up. We sent the report and hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. And I just wanted to mention that Anna McLean also helped draft this report. So we thank her for that. Quick facts, we had about 35 people in attendance, including our MLA, our MP, Stephanie McLean sent a representative. We had a representative from both Sauk Nation and Malahat. And 0 people registered in advance. So that tells me that people are busy and don't necessarily have the time to sign up for things. So good to note for next time. We had 2 media outlets and 2 stories were published in the Sooke Mirror. In no particular order, these are in no particular order, but the first question we had, which we asked people to put on sticky notes, is what is one thing your business needs to thrive and grow? And as we heard earlier, arts and culture is actually quite, it was one of the popular answers. And the next 3 slides covers the 10 or so answers that we got. So one was arts and culture. Space, as we know, commercial space and retail space is quite important to folks. Community food security, and agriculture. Networking and collaboration. I would say this is probably the most answers we got was about a 2-way communication line with the district and more collaboration, trust, and community connections, more collaboration with other businesses and connections and networking opportunities, even though the chamber does quite a bit of that already. Tourism, events to draw in tourists, and this was one comment. I work in the tourism business. Sooke has a tiny budget for promoting itself as a tourism destination, and money spent on tourism benefits us all. The rising tide lifts all the boats. And more support and contributions for festivals and events that attract tourists to our community. And Scott wanted to add something, I think. No? Okay. Okay, thanks. All right. Yes, again, more business support for our local community, more signage for businesses off of the main highway, a micro grant support program, access to business consulting services, support for local sole proprietor consultants working for the federal and provincial governments that are based in Sooke. At one point, I think I had mentioned having a working hub here for provincial employees because I think it's like 80% of commuters actually work for the provincial government in some capacity. Attracting other businesses for synergy and momentum that is green and justice oriented, particularly businesses for a blue and green economy. And then one of the topics that we've had here, the beautification program. And to the point about arts, having a consultation committee regarding new builds, which is where I think that would be really helpful with our planning and land use efforts, is having somebody on that committee that could, explain a bit more about the West Coast style, et cetera, et cetera. Beautification, which is underway now to help local businesses with promoting a community arts spiff up and not making it into a contest, just providing funding to every business and beautifying our downtown. Question 2 was a dotmocracy. Folks were given 7 dots to identify the top 10 priorities for an economic development corporation in Sooke. And these are in order. Number 1 was advocacy, particularly for infrastructure. I'm just going to pull down my notes here. Yes, infrastructure and provincial services, particularly better road service, et cetera, et cetera. Strategic planning, and this is more about coordinating businesses and organizations to pull together in the same kind of direction. What do we want to focus on? Is it the blue and green economy? Is it tourism, marketing, et cetera, et cetera? Nonprofit organization optimization, we talked quite a bit about that earlier, is pooling resources and strengthening administration and strengthening their administration and capacity. Entrepreneurial support, which I think WorkLink does some of already, but maybe they're not as well known in the community as they could be. Commercial space, of course, we know that commercial space is very difficult to come across, and affordable commercial space is really difficult. And then there were a few other lower numbers: grant writing, research projects, marketing, and HR and management services. So this is just an overview, and we just pulled together one statement saying that thriving businesses go hand in hand with active social, political spaces and people. And this was one comment from somebody about needing to value these human values-based connections and organizing efforts and providing the space, grants and whatnot to broaden conversations. And actually, on January 26th, I believe it was, Councillor Herb Haldane mentioned holding a larger gathering in Sooke, and we agree. I think that we were missing a couple of key industries, including construction and agriculture at this particular event. So that brings us to what is a community-led economic development corporation. We did have a high-level presentation running during this event about what it is and what it does. And you can see here that this is just a very brief synopsis of what a community-led economic development corporation does. There are other models like a municipal economic development corporation, but I think what I'm hearing from, well, everybody really is that it would have the same kind of challenges that we have with Canvas, for example, with staff capacity, funding, all of those kind of pieces. So keeping it at arm's length from the district seems to be the best option at this point. why we think a community-led CEDC is right for Sooke, and we mentioned in the previous slides about implementing the key actions from the strategy of 2021 and the OCP just recently passed in 2025. It would strengthen partnerships with Sooke Nation, local First Nations, and regional agencies, provides a bit of leadership and consistency. We were mentioning earlier, when there's a change in council, sometimes priorities get lost or dropped. It happens in First Nations communities a lot too. Positions for sustainable growth. Sooke is positioned for sustainable climate-aligned economic growth. I recently just wrote a paper about sustainable community development. And actually, Sooke is in a really good position for that. We have a number of plans and strategies in Sooke for green projects and research. So just geographically, we have a really good foundation for that. And then supporting local jobs and reducing commuter dependency. I mentioned earlier that 80% of folks on the road work for the provincial government, and most of them are in healthcare. So if we had the infrastructure here in Sooke, then we could keep folks off the road, more folks off the road. Here are some examples of economic development corporations that are relative to the population size of Sooke, including Community Futures in Cowichan, Community Futures in Cowichan, Community Futures Central Island, Campbell River Economic Development, Kawatsi, which is Up Island in Port Hardy, Songhees. Of course, I'm partial to Songhees, having been their CEO of their ECDEV corporation. They have a really good model. They actually formed a nonprofit organization and then created subsidiary businesses underneath, like Songhees Catering and Tours, and in partnership with Esquimalt Nation, Matulia, which holds Rock Bay property. And they're now developing that into an arts hub. Coast Economic Development Society, or Coast Funds, and then VIEA. And most of these organizations focus on fostering local entrepreneurship, diversifying economic activity, and managing community-owned assets to enhance local economic resilience. So this is just some recommendations for council, and same kind of approach, I think, is to endorse the creation of a community-led economic development corporation and approve seed money to establish an interim working group of a number of different representatives, First Nations leadership, and formation of a business entity to be decided on by the working group, and then begin development of an implementation plan aligned with the CEDS and OCP. What that working group looks like, I'm not sure yet, but I think from speaking with Gwen the other day and with Scott and a few other folks in the community, I think there is plenty of interest in wanting to join something like that. So this is just for discussion's sake, really. Estimated startup costs of a community-led economic development corporation is about $10,000 when you're looking at the legal fees for incorporation and bylaws, etc. Some more in community engagement, governance development, board training, establishing criteria for the board, those kind of things, and then some strategic planning. Although there is a CEDS already, it needs a bit of updating. So I'm a fan of efficiency. I think we should take what we have that's already in existence and update it for this potential organization, and then administration and reporting. And there's some references. That's all I got.
Okay, Catherine, thank you. Scott, would you care to contribute?
Thanks, Catherine. That was an awesome presentation. I think the town of Sooke can read that and get behind all of what you just put together there. I think today, even talking with the cultural plan that we were talking about. It's kind of been stalled out. And this is probably a great example of why an economic development corporation needs to happen. So that we don't have this stalling out, so that a corporation like this could take on something that maybe a council like this has approved. And then we work separately from council, but we come back once we're ready, once the work has been done, to then come to council and be able to work with them. And it's great that we have an economic development officer, and Gail's been nothing but amazing in the last year I've been working with her. And I can see her being part of that system where she's sort of the helicopter role of what Sooke is trying to do from an economic development standpoint. And this group could be a driving force with having the Sooke cultural plan that might be connected to it, to having the nonprofits maybe underneath there, so that again, there is an accountability scale and also a group effort. We already identified those areas of administration and grant writing and things like that, that I think a pool of nonprofits getting together can be better spending those funds, and probably be getting more out of those funds as well. And then it could also attach itself to sports and entertainment, health and wellness, all of these things that we've identified that might be great for us to be building. And again, comes back into building any kind of identifying tourism, larger scale opportunities, or art opportunities that we have, sort of like the Sooke Fine Arts Show, expanding that. I think a Sooke Economic Development Corporation can sort of be the overlying body that can take care of a lot of that stuff. One other group that we didn't identify in there in Catherine's presentation as well was Cumberland. So I actually had a talk with them last week, and they developed their they have an economic development strategy as well. That's a part of their plan, but they also identified an economic service delivery report that was part of it. So I think there's an opportunity for us to take a look at some of these communities that Catherine identified, and Cumberland, and maybe Ucluelet, and a few others that have really, probably in the last 10, 15 years, have been the leaders in BC in terms of building economic growth within those communities. So again, probably taking a deeper look at what they've done and getting a better idea of what we can actually implement after that. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you both for initiating this, creating the initial event and following through. So arising out of the community. So committee, questions or comments of our two speakers? Gwen.
From what I learned with Catherine, and I think Gail can maybe send in consultants, people that would speak to the district staff about, or council, about how these different models can work. They're already developed. We don't have to spend too much time and money, but it would, from what I'm hearing, and Catherine, you can correct me, or Gail, it would actually save district money by taking it out of the district's hands, right?
Well, I don't think it would be, I'll just make my comment. I don't think we're taking it out of the district's hands. The district has a sort of bilateral thing where we've hired a community economic development officer. We have a service agreement with the Chamber of Commerce. So those are two, that's sort of the traditional way in which many communities approach CED.
Okay.
So, however, this would be a whole new, and it's in the strat plan already. Yeah, so reframe that question.
Right. Well, I guess what I meant by that, I should talk more, I guess, is we pay the staff to do a lot of reports and going back and forth. So the hours that we're paying your team to put together reports to go to council that may not go anywhere is a waste of money. So in that sense, is I guess what I meant by we'll save district money if we have a corporation that's separate, that team does that legwork. Is that how this works? That's how I That's how I visualize it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think these corporations often take there's a percentage of grant funding they might be able to tap, and then that becomes operational funding, staffing, and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
From what I visited with Catherine, that it can also create its own money eventually. Like it can be sustainable outside tax dollars.
Mm.
So when I talk about the district money, I'm talking about the tax dollars. This would be sustained within its own
Yeah.
organization
Yeah.
that doesn't always tap
Yeah.
into tax dollars to operate. So that's a plus for the
Yeah.
district. It's one, in the long run, it's a short-term payout for a long-term gain. But I'd be interested in hearing who Gail has
Yeah.
worked with in the past and how the different models that they use.
Yeah.
And Catherine's has definitely.
Yeah. So
opened my eyes
Catherine,
to
Gail,
it.
and Scott, you're all welcome to respond, starting with Gail.
Yes, I've worked in various types of models throughout BC and Alberta. Some of them are more effective than others, but truly, the more collaborative the organization is, the more effective it is. You can have a economic development organizations that's partially funded by your municipal government and also funded by the tourism dollars that you bring in through the MRDT and grants that you're able to go after through economic development levels of programming at the provincial and federal level. So it's a collaboration of grabbing all the money you can get and knowing where to go and get it. I find the most effective models is, yes, when you also have your chamber and your other not-for-profit service organizations part and parcel of that authority. For example, we could have the Sooke Chamber as a member, but in my opinion, personally, I think our Sooke Chamber and our Langford Chamber should come together, and we would be far more effective because it would have a greater reach. So many of our citizens and businesses go to services in Langford, and they're all trying to do the same thing. So in order, the district here gives money to our local chamber, and yes, we want to support our local businesses, but what would it look like if it was stronger organization, more West Coast or West Shore based? Also, the Sooke Tourism Association, that would be part and parcel of coming in as a member of the authority, along with the MRDT, Tourism Task Force Committee. Also looking at the Sooke Food Network. There's economic development there, and it is driving a lot of food production, new business startups, expansions. They're wanting to see much more economic development come out of agritourism and agricultural development as it stands. Looking at Royal Roads University, we've got a brand new campus right there in Langford. It was there because it was to help students not have to travel so far to get to a university and get to post-secondary education. There's a number of other reasons too, but I won't bother going into that. But to have on the West Shore a recognized post-secondary education institute such as Royal Roads, have a very strong chamber like the Langford Chamber of Commerce, working very collaboratively with our chamber, which they do, with WorkLink, Employment Society. They cover the West Shore. They have an office here in Sooke. They have an office in Langford. They also cover Port Renfrew through an economic development task force and tourism task force. If we were to develop a standalone, if you want to call it an authority hub, whatever, it doesn't matter, but a collaborative model that brings all these groups together, they all have a vote or a say, and they develop a comprehensive economic and tourism destination development plan, that's, in my opinion, going to be your best bang for the buck. You can also have separate ones where all the economic development is done within a municipal governance structure. It's not usually the best example because your citizens don't believe they're truly heard at all times. But a more collaborative one, yes, I've seen that work so well over 35 years. Revelstoke, back in, I'm going to say the 90s, brought together Community Futures, a chamber, the economic development, the health authority, the education authority, all under one roof. And look at where Revelstoke is today. It's a gem, it's a jewel. So it can't be done without an agreement to collaborate. And the collaboration must be identified that the administrative services of each of those organizations are going to be shared. You're going to cut your budget. You're going to have more money to do more economic development and tourism development projects. Giving out money to so many organizations so they can hire one person to handle their administration doesn't work. It also,
Gail, I'm going to have to cut you off there because, you know, Al's not here and Al is the timekeeper because he would be shooting me looks, right? So I've let the first hour go far too quickly and we've got a lot still on the agenda. I just wanted to make a couple of quick points. One, last Monday, council requested that the quote, that the council direct staff to provide a high-level report on alternative models to maintain coordination, communication with the economic development community and ensure continuity from one council term to the next. So I think we've just had a preview of portions of that staff report when it arrives in due course, given all else on your plates at budget time in particular. And then we have this presentation today, which needs to be heard in, I believe, a committee of the whole context through a delegation request by Catherine and Scott, because that particular presentation needs to be heard in the context of the staff report, because here's one strong alternative model that is being presented. So having said that, further comments and questions? Chris Marshall is up first and then Mayor Tate.
Yeah, I was just gonna emphasize that, you know, there's a lot of groups doing similar work right now, and the last thing we want to do is create a fifth group. So we want to make sure that this group that's created is, as Gail was saying, an umbrella over top of all, and maybe you don't need all the ones underneath. Maybe there's one parent committee that is formed by all the rest, but like it starts to become less efficient and practical to have 5 different groups all doing marketing, all doing job creation, all, you know.
Right.
So anyway, just to say there's lots of groups in the community already doing similar work, and we just need to figure out how best to coordinate them.
Are there a lot of groups in the community doing this work? I mean, not the specific work of attracting and, yeah. Anyway, one ring to rule them all. I agree completely on that. Mayor Tate and then Scott, and then we'll have to close off.
Perfect. So thank you to the both of you for taking on the initiative and going with it. You need to start somewhere. So it's always the case that after something happens, it's, oh, I wasn't invited, or I didn't know about this, or I would have liked to come, but you need to start somewhere. And thank you for also reporting back so promptly also on what you heard and learned in that session. So I am in support of advancing this because I think it's the case where we have many groups going off and doing many different things, but they may not need to do all of those things. There may come a time where there can be a sharing of resources or realization that we are duplicating ourselves. I'll do this and you do that. And we've seen that happen naturally a bit in some places. And then other times, I think it is, to Ms. Scott's point, it is collaboration. Like, we don't need to fight for each other. One is not replacing the other. Both are important. This is not like choosing between sports and arts. They're both very important. We need both. So how do you facilitate both? Because they are equally important. It almost seems that with the SWOT, like, okay, so I'm getting ahead of myself, would support this, and then in terms, and I'll leave it to staff to determine where it would fit, because we have about 15 regular council meetings left in this term. Now, there could be special or committee of the whole, but there's fewer committee of the wholes remaining than regular council meetings. So they'll need to pull together where there's an alignment and to place it in what works appropriately. So we'll leave it to corporate staff to figure that out. I think the next iteration, because there's momentum here, is that the next piece is you have a strength, weakness, opportunities, threat, sort of like a SWOT analysis of what everyone is doing. And see potentially then where are the gaps? So what are we doing very well? Where are the gaps in this? And that was similar work that the Health Summit did back in, which is why there's sort of a call to have another one, was looking at all the health services in our community, who's doing what are the gems, what are the gaps, who should fill those gaps, or are those gaps even relevant now? Now that the hotel tax is new to us, so that did not exist previously, will that then replace or reform some things that have been done previously? I don't know. That work is more to come. And then where will it go? Because you also hear of volunteer burnout. Well, maybe you don't need to keep doing what you're doing, and or just interests and time have moved on, or people cannot do this and they want to do that instead. So there's sometimes a shift, and that's why I think it's the case where Sooke needs to shift into what that next iteration is. I just feel for myself that how council and local government operates in the realm of transparency, you're in chambers, we have cameras going, we have an agenda that needs to be printed in advance, we have committee selection that needs to be done a certain way. It doesn't fit in local government. And I was glad to hear that Ms. Scott say that's probably one of the not the best place. And I agree with that fully. Some things need to run independently. So it could be, you know, at Mr. Taylor's venue, and it could be at this time of day, as opposed to when is all of council available? Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? There's just restrictions on space and parameters. Can we webcast there? Well, no, you want a free flowing thing. Like, where would you possibly put the cameras and have all the IT to support it? It doesn't work. It needs to be more conversations. And not everyone wants to be in a microphone, have their name and address and everything recorded. They just want to say, you know, I'm really struggling here. And that might not be a big public broadcast out on what they want to share. So it needs to be done in that way. And I think as you build that momentum, it'll become more apparent on what the solution is. But you need to start with it. And that's what you've done, is you've taken it on. Okay, we're full. You're going to lead this and have that. And it is more of a like in some cases, a business owner may share more with you because they know you're in business. You're talking the same language. You get it. You don't have to explain everything to a total layperson that has a completely different lens. So I think, and it doesn't mean you have to pull out this example. It's the case where Sooke has its unique character and what works, and that fit will naturally come over time, and you'll say, okay, these things need to remain where they are. This is the pieces now that we're going to need to bring forward. And then as a not-for-profit separately, you may then trigger other seed funding sources that will become available, like many of our groups in our community do, and have success with. And then it'll run independently. You'll do a check-in with mayor and council. But if the mayor and council is like, nope, not interesting, we're just going to fix those culverts for the next 4 years. It's like, okay, well, we will continue on. We will update you. We'll do a check-in, fine, but it doesn't stop. Or it may be the case of, okay, we're at a place now where we can then focus our energy on that. What do you got? Here's what we're learning. Here's what you're learning. And you can cross-pollinate together. So I think it's exciting, and some of it is things we've heard before, and it's because those gaps haven't been filled. There's just been bigger ones that have come that our energy is need to be focused on. But I would also like, when you hear of the advocacy and this and that, I know sitting in the advocacy seat, I would love to have more community members or business owners write in support of the advocacy places, positions that we have taken, so that we're not alone in it, because they're valid, you know, like whether it's cannabis revenue to support local governments or a cell phone levy to offset 911 costs. Yes, but it all is on local government and us trying to find alternative ways to fund things that aren't just property taxes. We all benefit if that were the case. Or, you know, when appropriate, sending the message to the MLAs or the NPs to take your download back, thanks. As a business owner, I'm hit with this, blah, blah, blah. But it's shared messaging, and it's not just your mayor and council standing there alone in the cheap seats trying to flag a flag. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, Kevin, we need to be mindful of time but go ahead.
Yeah, and I just want to piggyback on what the mayor just said. It's exciting if entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurial spirit takes it, because we live in the box of government. And the box of government doesn't subscribe to no bad ideas, because when you're under the scrutiny of the council chambers, it's all bad ideas because it's tax dollars that are funding it. And we get into that spin. You know, you can only say this, you only have this much time. You're only allowed to talk for 2 minutes. You might have a great idea, but you have to sum it up. Yeah, but do you know what I mean? It's like the public comment is 2 minutes long. And, you know, I look at South Island Prosperity Project. They had to break away. They had to break away from government to be successful. And that's the message, is that you've got to go somewhere else to make it work. Because again, free-spirited entrepreneurs do figure things out. Necessity generates ideas. Government doesn't necessarily work that way. And it's exciting to hear these kind of thought processes, and hats off to both of you for having this meeting, because that's the direction it has to go to be successful. Because I can tell you, right, frankly, my experiences with local governments, as soon as we get in the way, things go not as clearly as they do when entrepreneurs are doing things. So anyways, that's a little bit of a shadow on local government, my feelings sometimes about it. But really, I had the box of government. No, I think that's it. I had a question. 80% of commuters work for the provincial government. Where did that number come from? That seemed like a high number.
That actually came from MLA La Jeunesse. That's that. So
I could clarify that a little.
could be,
He cited commuters, working age adults who commute into Victoria or into the CRD. And that was a high percentage. I think the numbers are more like 50 to 60%. But nonetheless, a lot of people drive in, and your co-working hub has been a district ask in the past.
Yeah, no, I was kind of shocked at that number. I was like,
it's a high number.
Wow, that's a high number. But anyway.
I think we had
government jobs, yep, I get it, you know, Coast Guard, Post Guard, you know, there's a lot of things, like I guess we had it all. Wow, cool.
No, but there's the Navy, there's the shipyard, there's UVic, there's all the schools. Like, we have health professionals, I would challenge that one, and I would ask for proof.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we should.
No, but I want to say thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for hosting that event, and well done, because that, you know, embryos, you know, grow into something. So hopefully we can continue it. Thank you.
So I think the key recommendation coming out of here is that we want to hear more on this, and I think council as a whole. I know Councillor Haldane's joined us in the audience, and I think he's absolutely in favor of entrepreneurial spirit, and as we all are. So I think Ms. Owen has recommended that the two of you submit a delegation request. And as the mayor stated, that can be lined up perhaps with the receipt of the staff report on alternate models. And we can have a committee of the whole, perhaps, if time remains in the year, to discuss the whole package in a really vibrant setting. Vibrant. Well, I'm picturing a room full of CED representatives, business owners, Karen Stones, the whole gang is here at a committee of the whole to have that kind of conversation, though that's my naive hope. But it's always possible, particularly with grassroots efforts to get the turnout to that meeting. So I think that leaves us without any need to, we are going to receive this report for information. And we do need to report back our findings to council. So how we do that can be part of our verbal reports on next Monday, with the notification that, yes, there will be a delegation request to discuss this further. So I think on that, I've moved that it be received for motion. Seconder, please, Councillor Pearson, and all approved? Yes. To the agenda, and it's here. Back in October, Deb Schenk with Gail organized a business walk. I think they, as the report states, they hit 45 local businesses. It was a very anecdotal kind of process, and yet certain key factors were identified. You know, these businesses value their clientele, they value their location in the town center is where the businesses we visited were. They know that issues remain affordability, the high lease rates. There's a phrase business friendly, and as my recollection is, they'd like to see lower commercial taxes, I think was one aspect of that. And then there were the key point around business concerns. There was homelessness, parking, traffic in general, vandalism and theft were key issues that were raised. And you know, the district will be, our next committee of the whole will be on dealing with Sooke RCMP issues regarding the increase in calls for service in terms of their staffing needs over time and immediately and over time, and also community safety in the town center. Barb, the barber, was here the last two meetings and shared her concerns. Councillor Pearson also made a very good motion to based on Barb's requests that there, how do we find a way to get eyes on the street overnight, because this arson incident is not isolated. There have been other such incidents. So, but that too will be a staff report coming back, maybe at that committee of the whole potentially, or at some later date. So anyway, I just find that that business walk report was a useful snapshot of a few days in October that these individual business owners shared their concerns. So there it is. Unless there's questions or comments, Gwen.
I think since the walk, there's things that we're talking about. Karen Stones and I chatted, if her rentals were going to take long, she would use our greenhouse for, we were offering space for her. Looks like she'll be open for Valentine's, but what it brought up is these commercial buildings having grandfather clauses for fire safety, wheelchair access. And I wondered if that's been talked about or addressed. I think because the restaurant probably had to have more fire walls in because of the type of business. That's why it is able to stay open. But the smoke damage for all the rest of that mall has never been brought up to fire code. When we built our place 20 years ago now, it was very strict, the fire code between the floors. And every inch of that basement ceiling had to be drywalled and then fire tile, and that's not happening in some of these older rental spots. So this is an experience that Sooke has had that has brought up concerns, because most of our commercial rental space are old buildings and not a lot of really great landlords that are taking that responsibility. And I think we need to maybe next council, I'm sure it won't happen this year because we are on limited time, but these grandfather clauses for fire safety and wheelchair ramps have got to be addressed, and that has to be changed. It's detrimental to our businesses if we have to close for a month or two, or we're lucky that she can stay open and the other businesses, so.
Thank you, Gwen. Yeah. Chris, do you have any thoughts on what you've just heard there from Gwen?
Yeah, I was talking to Dave Evans of the Roastorium, and he was saying that when he split the restaurant or the cafe from his roastery, he was complaining to the building inspector, who was requiring him to put the drywall right up into the ceiling, like not just stop at the roof, but actually go through and up. And he said it's what saved his business from having to be shut down or going through major renovations. And that was the building inspector when he was doing that new work requiring that, of an older building. I believe when businesses change over, that they need to bring things up to code,
From what I've learned is it depends on the nature of the business. Restaurants have a higher risk of fire, and that's when they are required, because when the Reading Room bookstore opened, her cost, the landlord actually puts that cost on the tenants, which is out of district's hands. Those are agreements. I think it sucks. It's not fair, but that's what happens. And that's where small businesses are struggling to even find a location in Sooke. What is affordable is old, and the old buildings landlords are asking, and yes, that's why that part of the building was saved as well. And we thought it was overkill, to be honest, when we built 20 years ago. It was an added expense, but we're really grateful now that that is there. It makes sense. So yeah, it's the nature of the business. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking of restaurants actually, and things like the grease traps and things, have to be augmented in order to count for the different type of use. But I think it's also just the nature of the building code and the building inspectors of the day and what they're requiring and not requiring. So I can certainly talk to our chief building official and just see what what his expectations are on a changeover of business. I might get back to you on that.
Our business is safe, but our business succeeds because other businesses succeed in this town. We need each other, and so for me, it's not a personal gain. It's more, we don't have enough businesses in Sooke for the amount of people and jobs. So if we can prevent this from happening by getting our landlords to upgrade their buildings behind the walls, that's really, and I feel the same way about wheelchair ramps. It's actually, you look at someone in a wheelchair and say, oh, well, we don't have to. We're grandfathered. We should be ashamed of that. That's something for over 20 years I've complained about, but I haven't really gone to the right source, and it doesn't really change. And that should. There are buildings that you still can't get into because it's not wheelchair safe, and it's a commercial building. And but the fire code it's a real eye opener. And those tiles in that whole mall, and the thing is the restaurant has it, but it didn't protect the rest of that building. That whole building is connected. the whole thing could have burnt down. But thank God that the restaurant was there because it did at least stop the fire from going farther.
Okay, further comments, Mayor Tate.
Just briefly on this, I did commercial leasing once upon a time. I think the challenge is that some landlords with their tenants will negotiate out what that lease is. Landlord in a place where they're trying to attract tenants may say, okay, we'll do all of this and we'll give you an improvement allowance of X amount per square footage to do your internal fit out. The challenge here is that if there's a long lineup of interested tenants, the landlord could say, well, no, I'm not going to do all of that because I know I don't need to do it for this particular tenant. So it'd be interesting for Mr. Marshall just to get some information to council, because in some cases, if it's not changing use, then it can prevail because it's retail's retail, one store to the next. When you enter in a kitchen, then it's a different environment, as you had already indicated, where more has to be done. If the landlord or the tenant disagree on who has to pay, they can just go to the next tenant and not have to do it. So it still doesn't solve the problem because now there's still an absence of space for certain uses. And whereas anything new coming in will be at that next, the highest and best or prevail, I wouldn't say best, but whatever the current code is, but it's brand new space. So then it's more expensive, which is still the barrier in terms of tenants trying to get into that space because now it's expensive space. So it kind of goes on and on. So I think that's where, again, it's a larger conversation, which, which would be helpful for a think tank, much of what we just talked about forming, to say, okay, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And then how do we advance that? And then it's the case of, okay, next large scale development, can you consider building out X type of space? So these sorts of businesses, because then it's the case where anyone looking to develop is looking at their risk. And it's like, gee, we don't want to build that and then not find a tenant who can actually come in here. Whereas if there's an agency saying, here's a suite of tenants that would love to be in your building, then there's a way of working together. And then they're not saying, okay, now I have to get my performer to work because I know that there's these tenants in the queue that are wanting to come in. And then we solve that problem of having more Sooke businesses located in Sooke, as opposed to picking out a brand retail, and then everyone's complaining like, how come our Sooke businesses aren't here? And it's because they've gone for that covenant and that larger retail from elsewhere that can come in and pay all of that, but not necessarily deliver what our local community wants or is desiring. So it's that sort of ongoing thing, question, more to come.
Okay. More to come. All right, so I think we'll just receive this one for information. So moved. Seconder, Councillor Pearson, all approved? Yes. Okay, so we're into 7.3 CED Action Plan Status Report, and then we'll follow with a roundtable at which our WorkLink and Chamber guests can speak. Thank you for being here today. Okay, so Gail Scott.
I apologize, but I'm not going to take very much time at all. With regards to the Royal Road students' presentation on transit options for Sooke, I think that should be brought forward to a committee of whole at a later date. I haven't had time to do anything else.
Busy. You were at a conference last week.
At the Destination Greater Victoria Impact Conference. And as always, you always walk away with some good little nuggets, but more importantly, contacts to money. And that's what I like the most.
Yeah. Those metrics that you use, new business licenses, the amount of money you can pull in, and then there was a third piece. Anyway, thank you for your work. So yeah, here's a motion arising that the Community Economic Development Committee recommend to Council that it receive a report from staff on the Royal Roads University Intercommercial Core transit options for Sooke at an upcoming Committee of the Whole. So
I'll move that, but I
can we
would
have a
like,
seconder, please?
I want to amend it.
Okay.
And the amendment would be to strike out at an upcoming committee of the whole and replace it with a Victoria Regional Transit Commission meeting.
That's a major amendment.
And then it's been seconded. I'll speak to it. So
Okay, it's been seconded by Councillor
we
Pearson.
are not a decision maker when it comes to transit. And yes, I hold a seat at the Transit Commission along with members from other municipalities. So if you want something to change here, then bring it to the entity that is actually able to do something about it. So I would suggest, in the absence of having, it's another, by the time we hear it and schedule it, given the calendar, we're running out of time to advance it to the commission. If you truly want transit to change, bring it to the Transit Commission directly and have them take it into consideration and add it to the list of demands so that we may see an improvement in transit here.
Well, I think that's okay, so we have an amendment on the floor. At this point, I guess we welcome comments on the amendment. I will note that the Royal Roads students did 4 different reports. One of them involved a local transit commuter bus of a sort. The other 3 dealt with parking issues in the town core. Gail, help me out here. What were the 4?
Yes, parking was one of the issues for sure. And we all know we have a parking issue in Sooke. So they looked at various options. An inner city transit bus that would be separate from the BC transit system, could be a private sector business. They also looked at various locations to set up new bus stops, to move people around, to make it more accessible for people to get around the commercial side of Sooke, as well as the tourism sites. When we look at Sooke potholes in the summer and how full it is, you look at holding a music festival at the same time, you have to find a way to move the people. So they looked at various options. They are not available to present themselves anymore. They finished their MBAs and they're gone off. But we have been given permission to review the presentations, do a high-level report, which could go back to the Transit Commission. It could perhaps be, if it's really high level and doesn't take much time, we could present it to a CAL and then to the Transit Commission, but that's your choice. But I do think the work that they did is worthy of at least having a look at what they've provided and presented.
Yeah, they also had a ride-sharing app that they call Sooke to Go and a work from home campaign. So it does cover quite a broad range in addition to those direct transit matters. So yeah, I think I'd like to, yeah, I would, can we amend this to at an upcoming committee of the whole? Well, at that committee of the whole, council could, or the committee could determine that a portion of these reports could go to the Victoria Regional Transit Commission.
Okay, so basically that would mean you're not in support of the amendment, so I don't think you need to amend it. So it's just the amendment was to strike out upcoming committee of the whole and replace it with Victoria Regional Transit Commission. That's the amendment.
Yeah, it's always great to get information. Committee of the whole, you're talking to yourself. The amendment is action, and I support action. Get it from a third party, which is Royal Roads. They made a presentation. It can come to us. We're going to agree with it, but we're not. There's no action coming out of that. again, we're looking at ourselves in the mirror. So I support it going directly to the commission so that they hear it firsthand. They can make their decisions and deliberate about the effectiveness of it. We're going to support it as a council because it's going to be, they're good things to do there. Drive people the potholes. I agree with all that stuff. However, we're not the decision makers in this case.
Okay, thank you. Further comments on the amendment?
Apologies. I'm concerned this is maybe getting complicated because Royal Road students, my understanding is, are not involved in this anymore. They have graduated or moved on. It's not Miss Scott's report, so I'm not quite sure if she's the best person to present this at the Transit Commission. It's not saying it's not a good report. I guess I'm not sure if Miss Scott would be the person to speak and answer questions to the Transit Commission because she didn't write this report. I don't know if that further complicates this.
I suspect our representative on the commission, Mayor Tate, would you not?
Well, I'm there to make decisions on, it's not a case where, like, I don't come to council meetings as a delegation to report to council. Like, I am a member of that commission, so I wouldn't make a delegation to report to the commission. So in the case of if those that have received this report feels its validity, that you want action on it, send it to the decision makers for action. If it's not quite there, then don't. But it's one of those things like, what are we trying to solve here? Is there actual, like, send it to those that plan out and make decisions around transit? Because I've raised the Sooke potholes plus. Doesn't go anywhere. You need to have, this is where I say it's strength in numbers, have other people tell the commission, this is important. You know, there was the commission as an example on this, I'm getting a bit fiery here, was like, oh, well, people can use the Sooke park and ride and walk up, really walk or bike from the Sooke park and ride to the potholes with your cooler, your kids and all your floatables. That's just an easy thing to do. It's not. It's massive to undertake that. So that's why sometimes having others say, this is important to our community. And that's how I've just seen things happen because other people are doing that. And I'm there to be support, but I don't need to be the one presenting it.
Okay.
So I don't know who would present it.
Yeah.
That is not me, but it's the case if you want to, I've been pushing for changes to happen within suburban Sooke, and what has happened?
Okay, so let us vote on this amendment. I will just state up front that I'll be voting against the amendment, given that these 4 Royal Roads reports deal very much with local actions that must be undertaken and looked at by the district. That's actually very little to do in these reports with regional transit matters. So I'll vote against that. Mr. Taylor, Mr. Pearson, Councillor Pearson, and Ms. Fisher. Okay, so that defeated. Oh, no, that's accepted. So we've amended the motion and now we vote on the main motion as amended. So that the Community Economic Development Committee recommend to council that it receive a report from staff on the Royal Roads University intercommercial core transit options for Sooke at an yeah, that's not going to work and forward it
Yeah.
to the Victoria Regional Transit Commission for their consideration.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So move.
Second.
Okay. You got all that. You can catch it later. All in favor? We'll vote for that then.
Counselor, Bateman, may I just say something? No, I might not be the best person to present, but the professor who works with those students, he is the one that provided approval for me to have the reports to synthesize them to a high level so I could work with him and you could also have a Royal Roads professor present.
It's Tandy Williams. Yeah. Thank you for having me here. It's a real pleasure. And I mean, anecdotally, I love the conversation about the community-led economic development committee, that unifying force in the community to ensure that all of the stakeholders are engaging appropriately and you sort of have your finger on the pulse of what's happening, I think is quite smart and would in the end up benefiting you folks anyways. That's just my 2 cents. In terms of WorkLink, we continue to prepare for our tourism season in Port Renfrew, running the Visitor Information Center there. The work with Gail Scott continues, building out Shoreline Business Community Services Co-op, Business Services Co-op, pardon me, which dovetails quite nicely actually with the conversation that you're having here. So I guess it's all about timing and things lining up at the right time. One thing that is new is we are quite frequently being called upon to provide information about what is happening in the labor market, just because of our position, connecting employers and job seekers. Often organizations are looking to us to provide data to support their funding applications and so on. So this is new and interesting and welcome. So we're quite happy to be doing that. Finally, we are also being approached because of the work that we're doing with youth, and we know that the youth in our communities are struggling to find meaningful employment, and they're facing a number of barriers caused by COVID and all of those other things, which I won't go into because I'm sure you're keenly aware. Just recently, we are in negotiations with CPark actually to provide some youth employment programming, basically helping our youth to get job ready. We're not there yet, but it's hopeful. We're having a discussion about it now and trying to see how that might take shape. Finally, with respect to youth, through our START youth employment program, we have identified some additional funding that can be used to address the barrier of transportation, which is also topical. And so we have just built a partnership with DriveWise that is going to help specifically the youth in Sooke. So we have 8 youth. That's from the time that I left the office, it was 8 and they were still coming in. So that are interested in accessing that. So that's essentially gonna provide the funding for these youth to get their driver's license. So they're going to go through the entire training program. So not only will they have their licenses, but they should be pretty safe on the road as well. So that's the good news that I have to report. Thank you.
So any questions of, no? Gail, you have.
Tandy, I just read that Port Renfrew Pachita First Nation are having their election on February 15th of this year.
Yes.
And that past chief, Jeff Jones, is rerunning for chief.
Yes.
So what do you anticipate changing for economic development and tourism development in Port Renfrew due to this election?
So I don't know that it's directly due to the election. I do, however, know that in my conversations with Pachita as well as their representatives, they are looking to build autonomy in the, I don't want to say autonomy in the agency in the region, and essentially build out their economic development organization such that they can handle things like tourism and so on. They're not there yet. We are presenting a proposal to them because we're holding some of those items at present. And of course, there's no desire to hold them permanently. We would like to steward them and then pass them along so that they can then take it in another direction. So we've built out a 4-year transition plan that aligns with their plan as well. And the hope is to get in front of them and present it. Of course, with the election upcoming, it's sort of, everything's on pause and we're mindful of that. So that we can then illustrate to them where the I guess off ramp for us is and the on ramp for them, so that we can hand over something that's sort of turnkey and ready to go. Sorry, does that answer your question, Gail?
Yeah, it does. One thing that's important is Destination Canada, who
Yes.
is the sponsor for the Wanda Fuca bioregion cross-border or cross-corridor tourism investment strategy. They want very much to have more communication with the Pachita because it's a very important piece of that whole plan is the First Nations relationship development.
Yes.
So I'm just wanting to stay on top of with the election, who the new chief and council is coming in and what's their interest in tourism, because I
Yeah.
know
I can tell you, like, anecdote, like based on my conversations with them, they're very much in favor of working with, the folks from Destination Canada and so on. My lived experience illustrates that it's often an issue of capacity more than anything else. I too would like a little more face time to advance some of these initiatives and so on. It's just they're just not there. Like there's a lot of internal things that they are currently dealing with. Well, sort of ongoing things that they're dealing with. And so I don't know, that's essentially the stumbling block or the impediment, and things are not moving quickly, unfortunately. That said, there is a new organization that they've hired to help manage some of that through Arise, and they have an additional person working on tourism in particular, sorry, her name escapes me at this moment, but essentially, I think once they build their foundation and get it to where they want it to go, that's when they're going to be ready to invite other opportunities. But that is on the radar. If that,
Good.
yeah.
But
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And finally, just quickly, Peter is stepping out, right, and retiring,
Peter's
semi-retiring
stepping.
or whatever.
I think it's like a full retirement. He's
Oh, it
the
is. Okay.
exiting stage left.
So how does that look at WorkLink?
At present, the executive director recruitment process is just about done. The plan is for Stewart. The plan is for Peter to assist with the transition, and it's looking as though it's mid-April is what I was told by the board. So, yeah,
Thank you.
you're
Yeah.
most welcome.
To think 2 years ago, WorkLink was over there by the fitness center, and for 3 years. And look at that amazing building that you've created out of the ground. Okay, so roundtable, any further comments at this point before we close this chapter? I will just quickly, because I've always got something to say, share around the Food Security Network. Tony, I attended last week in his stead. The Food Pod Group, who we heard from when that was, October, September, they presented to the Food Security Network. Much the same presentation. They've since then, they have identified a few potential long-term tenants who've reached out to them. They are young people, UVic graduates. They're full-time jobs. They've got young families. They're very interested in the district getting involved in some capacity. They're quote unquote happy to hand this to Gail and Sooke or another to develop the feasibility study and determine the financials. Because this is quite a ambitious project, $2 million down by Cooper's Cove. They would like to join the BC Food Hub Network as things evolve. But there was certainly interest by those in the room the other night, the Food Security Network, around this subject, and more to come. Right, Gail?
did you want to speak about Kent's?
Oh, I will. Microphone. Kent Mullinax from Kwantlen College, a new Sooke resident now out on Woodlands. He is a major mover and shaker in this long-term planning for bioregional food system security. And the next project for Kwantlen and his team is the Vancouver Island Bioregion Food System Study. And he made a presentation that I could go into some detail here, but the key piece is food self-reliance capacity of a region. We're one of 7 bioregions in BC, the island and the Central Coast, Powell River area. And the plan with these studies is to determine how food secure we can become by 2050. And there's a lot of policy and the optimization of land to maximize food self-reliance. And he's talking around agriculture as a commercial enterprise. Ellen Lewis was there and she made good points around we need backyard food security too. Anyway, he sought an endorsement from the Food Security Network, and they'll be coming back to him. He's also going to be, likely you'll be receiving a delegation request from him because he's seeking municipal endorsements as well, without any financial commitments. But it's those endorsements that will allow him to go forward and get the kind of grant money that he needs. So on that note, I don't need to make that motion around Tony being appointed by council to the.
Through the chair, no, because Tony was already, Councillor St. Pierre was already appointed at a council meeting, and so he is still appointed.
Great.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a moment to thank you, Chair, for chairing this particular meeting. Also like to acknowledge and thank the participation by our councillors as well as our members of the public. You all have a lot of expertise in running your business, so it's all contributed to this. So as this committee winds up, it's not because the work isn't valid or that there is more work to be done. It's just where we're at in the term. And I think you've had a conversation about the structure and what works and doesn't work and the confines of local government. And some things, sometimes you need to color outside the local government lines to get the results. But you don't know that until you actually go through the process. So thank you for your patience in going through that process and for all that you've contributed to date. So just wanted to express my gratitude. And there's always hope. It's not all doom and gloom and despair. It's just sometimes it's keeping it burning. So thank you for keeping it burning.
Okay, well said, Mayor Tate. And so thank you, committee, and staff, of course, for all your time you've dedicated to this, and to our advisory groups, and to JP for joining us, and onwards to whatever's next. Okay, so adjournment, please. That's Councillor Pearson and Mayor Tate. All in favor? Yes, we're done.